4 people killed in riots in a French overseas territory. This has pushed Emmanuel Macron to declare a state of emergency in the Pacific islands of New Caledonia. 1 gendarme was killed. 3 indigenous Kanak youths in riots over electoral reform also lost their lives. The independence lobby is set against the changes. They say it all risks isolating further the native Kanak population. We'll be speaking with our guest here in the studio, Mikaa Blugeon-Mered, after this report.
Pour 351, contre 153, l'Assemblée nationale a adopté.
The bill would allow French residents who have lived in New Caledonia for 10 years to vote in provincial elections, expanding the small archipelago's electorate by around 40,000 people.
In France, the country of human rights, we have French citizens who are still not allowed to vote in provincial elections, even though they have lived in New Caledonia for 25 years. We cannot accept this injustice on a French territory.
Paris says the current arrangement is undemocratic, excluding about a fifth of the overseas French territory's overall electorate. But the move to reform it has proved controversial, provoking days of violent unrest on the archipelago and inflaming tensions among New Caledonia's indigenous Kanak people. Voting in provincial elections is currently restricted to people who were living in New Caledonia prior to 1998 and their children, an arrangement that came about as part of the 1998 Nouméa Accord, which helped end conflict between Paris and the Kanak people, who make up around 40% of the population. They now fear that the law will dilute their vote at the archipelago's parliament.
Kanaks are not taken into account in this bill. If we accept this, we will become like the Aboriginals of Australia or other people who are oppressed around the world and now have no real worth.
It's the latest flashpoint in a decades-long tussle between Kanaks seeking independence for New Caledonia, which became French in 1853, and descendants of French colonizers and prisoners of the former French penal colony who want to remain part of France. French President Emmanuel Macron has called for a resumption of dialogue between factions. Paris is also sending additional police forces to the territory to help restore order.
Emerald Maxwell with that report. Our guest in the studio is Mikaa Blugeon-Mered from Sciences Po here in Paris, where he's a lecturer on French overseas territories. Mikaa, thank you for joining us here. This seems like a story where 2 worlds are colliding, but then if you look at the basics, this rioting is all about electoral reform, and people might be listening to that thinking, how does electoral reform lead to riots in this kind of situation? And perhaps it's all based on how or what is the relationship between Paris and Nouméa. What is the relationship between France and New Caledonia? Can you explain more about that for us?
Yeah, I'll try to be concise. But we're basically in the process of decolonization on this territory. And what's happening now is, on the one hand, we have a government in Paris that is saying, hey, there's been 3 referenda, you've voted no every time, disregarding some aspects that are quite important. The fact that Kanak opposition independentists did not vote and boycotted the last referendum in 2021. And they're saying, well, the institutions are clear. The law is saying this and that and that. And basically on the other side, in Nouméa, you've got, of course, the loyalists who are saying, well, the government is right, so to speak. And then the independentists who are saying, well, we don't recognize what you are offering us in terms of institutionalization.
Okay, this raises many questions. One is, why did the Kanaks boycott the referendum?
So basically, it's a 40-year-long process, which started basically in 1988 and then was reaffirmed in 1998. So the idea was simple. Before 2018, there had to be a referendum for the Caledonian people altogether to decide on autodetermination or not. And basically in 2018, they voted no for independence at 56%. And then there was another one 2 years later. That was part of the process. It was set in the process. In 2020, they voted no at 53%. And then the third referenda could have happened or should have happened in 2022. But in that year, you had the presidential election and you had also the general election, parliamentary elections in France altogether, globally. So basically, President Macron decided to prepone the third referendum to 2021, but in December 2021, we were still in COVID times. And the Kanak basically said the government, the French government, is disregarding a reality, which is we are currently suffering and we are mourning from our losses from COVID. So basically they thought, hey, and they said, this is a disregard for our traditions and so on.
And is this a pattern that the Kanaks have felt, that there's been a constant disregard of how they feel? Because the Kanak gentleman we heard in the report was talking about that they would be treated like the Aborigines were mistreated in Australia in that sense. Has there been a pattern there of France not really taking the Kanaks' point of view into account?
Since 2021, one can say it was the case. So basically in 2021, there's this referendum. It's heavily boycotted by the independentist movements. So basically the answer was a massive no to independence for the third time. And this third referendum was supposed to end the process. And so basically in 2022, 2023, and ever since, the government in Paris has said, well, you guys have voted thrice. So basically, it's settled. There's no more question of independence or whatsoever. Or maybe there could be, but in like 2 generations' time, not anymore. So basically, ever since 2021, this position was basically criticized heavily by the independentist movement. They were saying, you are not listening to us, and you are imposing on us something that we didn't even vote for. We didn't go to vote because you disrespected us.
And is there a sense of unfairness? Because in terms of standard of living, in terms of job opportunities, in terms of rich, poor, is there a big difference between the Kanaks and the, shall we say, French white descendants?
It's a whole context indeed. There's the economic aspect with jobs, or rather unemployment, rather being, of course, much more important in the Kanak communities than in the rest of the communities there. There's the access to capital as well, to create jobs, and many more stuff like that. So basically, wherever you look at in this society, the Kanak feel that they are second-class citizens to some extent. And so what's happening now is quite simple. Every single time since 2021, the Parisian government has offered something to the Kanak communities, and particularly to the independentists. What the independentists responded was, well, you are disrespecting us one way or another. Whether it was for a pact to reignite the nickel industry, whether it was this question of the electoral body reform, regardless of the topic, every single time their response was, you are not listening to us and you are force-feeding us something that is not adapted to the situation.
Is there a pattern, Mikaa, with the way France is dealing with its, I'll call them overseas territories, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because we've reported here about problems in other places such as Guadeloupe, Martinique, these issues. Is there something fundamentally not working about how France, Paris, the government deals with these far-off places?
I would argue that there is a systematic issue, which is a lack of political strategy, and that has been going on for decades.
So this is multiple administrations have had the same problem and not really dealt with it?
Absolutely. Well, even when they tried, it wasn't really adapted. It was built, these plans were built by people who have no experience or little experience regarding the in the overseas territories or whatever. So basically, there was this idea for many decades that some economic plans or some institutional reforms for the overseas territories, like there would be a one-size-fits-all kind of approach. And of course, this didn't work. Now, what we are seeing in New Caledonia is specific. Here we are talking about territory that is seeking decolonization. And what the independentists are saying, or have been saying for the past 2 years, is you are recolonizing us. So it's not just you are disregarding decolonization as a process, you are recolonizing us.
So this electoral reform, enabling white settlers, I think it is fundamentally white settlers, isn't it, who are there, who've been living there, allowing them to vote. It's actually, like you say, a kind of backdoor recolonization. Is that the issue?
So that's what the independentists are saying. But at the same time, the French government in Paris doesn't have a choice, because from a legal point of view, they have like until 2025 to actually pass these reforms. And these reforms, they're not just imposed by the French legal system, they're imposed by the European Court of Human Rights, actually.
And the thing is, of course, everybody should have the right to vote. That's another important thing, isn't it?
That's kind of the idea.
So I'm contradicting what I've just said, but that's the issue. It should happen. I'm wondering, why does France want to keep hold of a territory which is posing so many problems? Why not just decolonize?
Oh, wow.
Have I just opened Pandora's box? Perhaps I have.
Okay, so there's plenty of ways to answer that. But I'm going to try to make it simple. So the first thing is, of course, and that's one thing that everybody thinks about when it comes to New Caledonia, is natural resources. Nickel in particular, which is a so important, so critical metal for the energy transition and the digital economy. So that's the first element. Then another element is, if you let New Caledonia go, what's going to happen to the other ones? There are also independentist movements in French Polynesia. And it's actually the independentist parties who are in control of French Polynesia at the moment.
But doesn't that all depend on a certain idea of France, empire, whatever? I mean, those days have gone, haven't they? Isn't it really time for people to have their independence? Is that the other argument?
Kind of. Of course, I'm not going to take sides here.
I'm not expecting you to at all, but you study this and you're an expert, and that's very clear. Yeah. I'm just kind of I'm playing devil's advocate and seeing what you can give us back on that one.
That's exactly the point. And here, basically, it's not just about France as well. Australia is watching this. China is watching this. This is really in their geographical, regional environment. So basically, anything that happens in that line, around those lines in New Caledonia, could also have an effect in Australia. Another element which is key, and this is, I guess, one of the reasons why Gabriel Attal, the Prime Minister, decided tonight to actually ban TikTok, at least temporarily, from New Caledonia. Actually, there's also other countries, which we're not going to name, but everyone can think who they are astutely, who are actually adding fuel to the fire here, gaslighting these issues, playing a information war in New Caledonia in particular, to destabilize not just New Caledonia, obviously, but also France and their allies, Australia being one of them, in the region. So it's not just a French thing. And that's also one of the reasons why, as part of the French Indo-Pacific strategy, France doesn't want or cannot let go of New Caledonia as it is today.
Fascinating. And that is set to continue with the state of emergency now imposed in New Caledonia. Mikaa Blugeon-Mered from Sciences Po, thank you for explaining, because that's what it was, a real explanation about all sides. And there are many of this discussion, which is a lot broader than just what's happening in New Caledonia, but clearly that is the meat and drink of the matter right now. Mikaa Blugeon-Mered from Sciences Po, where he is lecturer in French Overseas Territories. Thank you for joining us here, France 24. We appreciate your time, sir. Thank you very much indeed. That's apropos for this Wednesday. We take a very short break. After that, it's our